He ran toward the entrance while people poured out the other way, screaming and stumbling over each other, some of them bleeding, some of them dragging friends who couldn't stand. The music had stopped inside Pulse, replaced by sharp cracks that didn't belong in a nightclub. Eatonville police officer Omar Delgado didn't wait for backup. He pushed into the chaos with a rifle and a flashlight, trying to find where the shots were coming from and how many people were still trapped in the dark. Inside, the air was thick with smoke and panic. Strobe lights still flashed in places, turning the hallway into a broken sequence of frozen frames, bodies on the floor, shoes scattered, a phone vibrating in a puddle of spilled drink, a man on his stomach trying to crawl. The gunman had already moved deeper into the club, and every second mattered. Delgado and other officers shouted for people to get down, to stay low, to move when they were told. Some didn't move at all. Near the dance floor, Delgado saw a man lying face down, hit and motionless, except for the desperate movement of his arms. It was Angel Colin, shot multiple times and then crushed by the stampede of people trying to escape. Colin could barely lift his head. He later said he remembered only the officer's size, his glasses, and the sound of his voice telling him he was there. Delgado grabbed him and started dragging. The floor was slick and crowded with debris. Delgado pulled Colin by his arms, hauling him inch by inch toward the exit, while other officers fired down the corridor to keep the gunman pinned back. Colin's weight and injuries made every foot feel like a mile. Delgado kept pulling anyway, teeth clenched, breathing hard, eyes scanning for movement in the dark. When they reached the doorway, hands reached in to help, and Colin was pulled into the open where medics could take over. Delgado didn't stop there. He went back in. Pulse was still a crime scene in real time, with shots echoing from deeper inside and people hiding in bathrooms and storage rooms, whispering into phones, praying the door would hold. Officers moved in short bursts, using walls for cover, trying to locate the shooter without stepping into an ambush. The gunman, Omar Mateen, eventually barricaded himself in a bathroom with hostages. Negotiators tried to buy time, but time was what the wounded didn't have. As the standoff dragged on, officers kept pulling people out in small groups when they could, guiding survivors through narrow passages and past bodies they couldn't stop to help. Outside, victims were laid on the pavement and on makeshift stretchers. Ambulances came and went in rapid cycles. Some wounded were loaded into pickup trucks because there weren't enough official vehicles to move them fast enough. The scene became a pipeline: doorways, hands, blood-soaked clothing, shouted names, then the slam of a vehicle door and the rush to the hospital. When a SWAT team finally breached the club, it was decisive. A police vehicle was used to break through an exterior wall so officers could reach the bathroom area. Hostages ran. Officers shouted for them to keep moving and not stop. A final exchange of gunfire ended with the gunman dead. Afterward, teams swept rooms for threats while medics waited for the signal to enter. For the public watching the news later, the story became numbers: 49 killed, dozens wounded, a deadliest mass shooting in modern U.S. history at that time. For Delgado, it was the weight of bodies, the sound of pleading, the moment you recognize you are walking into a place people might not walk out of. He did walk out, but he didn't leave it behind. The next morning, Delgado woke up and the scene replayed itself without permission. In his first nightmare, he was back inside the club, bodies stacked on the dance floor, gunfire starting again as he tried to drag someone out. He had responded to violence before, but nothing like that compressed, that intimate, that prolonged. He had watched people die. He had touched the living who felt like they were already slipping away. He had moved through a building where every doorway could have been the end. In the days that followed, Orlando turned into a city of memorials. Families waited for confirmation of names. Survivors sat in hospital rooms with bandaged limbs and blank stares, trying to grasp what had happened in a place meant for music and escape. Delgado was called a hero in headlines for going in and for pulling people out. Cameras captured his reunion with Colin at the hospital. Colin grateful, Delgado emotional, both of them altered by the same night in different ways. But Delgado's body began to react as if the shooting was still happening. Loud noises snapped him into panic. Sleep became a fight. He started to dread the quiet, because that's when the images returned. The hallway, the bodies, the moment he wondered if he would make it back out. He tried to push through it the way many first responders did. Work, routine, silence. But the symptoms didn't fade. They spread. Delgado's department moved him to desk duty. On paper, it looked like relief. In practice, it felt like exile. He had trained for the street, for movement, for decisions made in seconds. Now he sat at a desk, staring at screens, listening to radios, trying to act normal while his mind kept dragging him back into that club. The praise from strangers didn't help. It made him feel more alone because it didn't match the reality of what he carried. Months later, the pressure shifted into something colder: employment, uncertainty. Delgado faced post-traumatic stress while trying to hold on to the job that had put him in that hallway in the first place. Reports described him being dismissed from his department near the end of 2017, before he reached full pension eligibility, a blow that landed on top of everything else he was trying to survive. It raised an ugly question about what happens to rescuers after the headlines fade. Delgado fought for treatment. He talked about nightmares, anxiety, and the way trauma can follow you home and sit with you at the kitchen table. He wasn't the only one. Other first responders from Pulse described similar symptoms and frustration over how agencies handled the aftermath. The shooting didn't end when the gunman was killed. For the people who went in, it kept going in their heads. And yet Delgado was still here. He kept showing up for his family. He kept talking when silence would have been easier. He kept trying to rebuild a life that didn't revolve around one hallway and one nightclub. Survival, for him, wasn't just staying alive in the moment the shots rang out. It was waking up the next day and the next, learning how to live with what he had seen, and refusing to let that night take everything. Pulse left a permanent scar on Orlando and a permanent scar on the people who responded. Delgado's story exposed a second, quieter disaster that followed the first. What happens to the rescuers when the cameras leave, when the memorials fade, when the adrenaline drains and the memories remain? Healing didn't come with a medal. It came with therapy appointments, sleepless nights, and the slow work of finding a way to function without shutting down. He went into the club because people were trapped and time was running out. He dragged at least one man to safety under the threat of continuing gunfire. He walked back into the darkness more than once. And when it was over, he carried the scene home like a weight he couldn't put down. That is what he survived. Thank you for listening to Horrifying Survival Stories. Subscribe for more stories of those who faced the impossible and lived.